On behalf of the McConnell family, I'd like to welcome all of you to St. James. In particular, we welcome His Worship, our Mayor, John Tory, and the Honorable Kathleen Wynne, our Premier, and all of the members of City Council. It's also our delight to welcome all those worshiping with us in St. James Park. We wish that we could accommodate everybody inside, but we hope that you will find refuge and shade under the canopy of the trees and under the tents that the BIA has erected today. Immediately following this service, we invite all of you to come out into St. James Park and to welcome and to greet the McConnell family. We invite you to immerse yourself in this worship. We are invited to step inside a moment of grief and sorrow, but we are also invited to celebrate Pam's life in the way that she lived it with us, how she loved us, cared for us, changed us, and how we did the same for her. So I encourage you to follow along in this worship as deeply as you are able. We turn now to page 1. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. And also with you. Let us pray. God, our Maker, your creative will gives life to all that is. Your quickening power brings us to birth and raises us from death. Take this, your daughter Pamela, into your keeping, and give her the new life that is promised in Jesus Christ our Lord, who once was dead and lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, now and forever.
Individuals or situations that come to mind. Loving God, today as we gather to celebrate Pam's life, we are mindful of the activists and community leaders and all of those here and around the globe working for a more just world, many of whom are working in very difficult situations. We lift their names to you. We are mindful that we still have far to go to better care for this earth, to help people experiencing discrimination or prejudice, and to help those held back by poverty or without basic health care or housing. We lift these names or situations to you. We are also mindful of those who have gone on before us, activists, loved ones, and we celebrate their lives as we mourn our loss. We lift these names to you. We are mindful of the love that surrounds us, the opportunities before us, and the call you give us to make a difference in this world. And we pray for strength to continue on, the joy of joining with others in common cause, and the wisdom even to turn enemies into friends. We offer all of these prayers to you in your many names. Amen.
And together we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
I'd like to say bonjour, the way Magadaduk. My name is Animki Kwe, that means Thunder Woman, and I am of the Red Tail Hawk clan. I've been here invited by the family, friends of our dear friend, Pamela McConnell, in celebration of her beautiful life, the life that she had here. She's been here for many, many, many years. Pamela left in the time of great sustenance, because that's what she brought to our families, the indigenous community. She brought so much life and sustenance, spiritual, educational sustenance to our families. And I want to thank her for that. I want to say miigwech, and I want to say miigwech tito to the family for supporting her. I want to say that in the month of the 8th moon of creation, that's what this is all about celebrating our good life and giving each other that sustenance and support. So I want to give her a song that was given to my family. I am a great-great-granddaughter of a war chief, and I'm also a chief in the Three Fires Society. I hold a 4th degree there as a teacher, and that's why, in her honor and in the honor of her family and the community here, I wore this chief's hat. So I want to say that I want to give her a song that will keep all the sustenance, all the beauty, all the things that she has spread, in our community, all the seeds that she has grown. And I'm going to give this to the family. This is the sustenance of the 3 sisters. And there's a beautiful story with the 3 sisters, and it's the leadership, the community, and the nation. So this is all in there. So I want to give that to them. But I also, before I sing the song, I also want to give this, because I am a Buffalo chief of the Three Fires Society, and I take care of of the spiritual education of our children till they grow into their 7th fire and all the 7 stages of life. This here is a buffalo skull, 4 buffalo skulls, and they represent that leadership. But also, the buffalo stands in the western doorway, and in the western doorway, she exudes that leadership that say, hey, I am here to support you. I love you. I respect you. And that's what Pamela was all about. We are going to miss her. I miss her. And I know you do. So I want to give my condolences, my sincere condolences to the family. It was so beautiful to see you come in here, so strong. So I want to say, and also the other leaders that are here. And so I want to, the song talks about the sustenance of life, the continuation of life into the future. My grandpa gave this song to me, and he always said, "Animkikwe, make sure people hear the song so they will hear it, but also the cross-pollination of all our words and actions will go all over the world. It will reach everybody." So, Nemusu, 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 nemusu. How, hey, 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 yeah. How, hey, 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 yeah. How, hey, 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 yeah. How, hey, 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 yeah. Again, na? So I want to say miigwech to each and every one of you for sharing that song. Carry that song within your mind and your beautiful hearts and your beautiful spirits. And so I just want to say miigwech for, again, for inviting me here in the land of the Mississaugas and of New Credit and the Haudenosaunee and Wendat. How I want to say miigwech to the Creator for bringing us, all of us here together. Miigwech.
Peace be upon you all the guests, the family. My name is Suraya. I'm a neighbor and I'm advocate. I'm going to be reciting some of the verse from Holy Quran. In chapter 49, verse 13. O mankind, we have created you, male and female, and appointed you race and tribes, that you may know one another. Surely nobles you among you are the sight of God is the most God-fearing of you. God is all-knowing, all-wise. Chapter 2, verse 62. Indeed, those who believe, those who were Jew and Christian and Sabian, who believe in God and the last day, did righteous, and will have their reward with their Lord, and no fear will there be concern them, near they will be grieved. Since Pam passed away, and I've been crying, everybody who mentioned her name, she left. I felt like I was a child who were giving her a hard time in the community, asking her any needs that we have. And at the same time, I've been answered all of my questions, all the needs, including the pool. And when the pool was built, Suraya, make sure the Muslim women in the community use the pool. Make sure they use it, she said. And I started telling the people at the end of the month, they said, when is the pool? And the pool will be done. And then I saw the screen, see-through. Pam, you told me there is a female only swimming. The screen is open. Do you think I build the swimming pool without the curtain? She said. And I went to the Saturday when the pool was open, and all the community members was in the pool. There is no pool. There was a pool. There is no people to swim with. And every people in the community was in the pool. So it was 1 hour. Like, we just chatting in the pool without, like, some of us, we don't know how to swim. And we just standing, and we asked them, like, can you extend the hours? And she said, sure. She made it 2 hours. We learned how to swim. She made it so accessible that the community members has not to pay the fee, so they don't have to compromise if they have to buy food or they have to take the kids to swimming. She was so justice. She was the backbone of Regent Park, or revitalization that's taking place. If we have concern, if we make sure if people are coming back, that's where we go to. Let's learn from the legacy that she left. She says stuff and she makes sure she's done it. The first time when I met her, and I say, I want to be like her. She was standing always for justice. Nobody left behind when any crisis take place. The family who are the young person who died, the moms, she comforting them. She sit with them. How is the mom? And she see me on the street. Are she okay? They felt being loved by her, and they felt she's a part of their family. I cannot finish what she has done for the community. It's been so hard. It was a very tough time for me. Are we going to finish revitalization? Are we going to complain to who now? It was a very hard time. Let's continue her legacy. Let's keep our word. We do what we said we're going to do. I miss her so much, and I'm going to put her in my prayer always. It's been an honor to stand here to speak about her. And I don't have anybody to complain with. And every meeting when I go to her, and do you have another question? I felt I've been heard always when I see her. And everything that I've been taught in my religion, I see on her. Everything that she practiced, every smiled, she greeted to the community members. It doesn't matter if she's busy or not, and she takes time. I see her in Fresco, and I see her on the streets when she takes her grandkids, and she takes time, and she taught me so much that you cannot read it in a book, or you could go to a lecture, and I will keep in my heart what she's been practicing, and I will continue to do my best, what she has been fighting for. She was real social justice. You could see on her and her face and her practice. I'm grateful to be here, and thank you all.
Mom was born in England to a woman she playfully called St. Margaret. My mother's mother, my grandmother, was very devoted to her faith and worked with her church to improve the lives of those who suffered, particularly those who experienced poverty. Grandma was orphaned as a small child and was required to make her own way in the world. Although she ensured that my mother had a very different life than she did, she also made sure that my mother had a strong understanding and empathy for the lived suffering of others. She taught my mother that poverty and hardship were caused by circumstance, were not human flaws, and thus could be overcome. My mother was 2 when her father died. When she was 3, my grandmother met my grandfather at a New Year's Eve party. My grandparents were married before Easter, and Grandpa Harry immediately adopted my mom. Having experienced abandonment, the adoption of my mother was a priority for my grandmother. Grandma always said that Grandpa chose to marry her because he had fallen in love with Pam and her young spirit. And while I have no doubt that was true, I know that Grandma married Grandpa because she knew that he would provide them both with unconditional love and acceptance. It won't surprise you, but my mother was a very precocious child. My grandmother recalled many stories of the difficulties that she had finding my mother when they immigrated to Canada. Mom would pop into random neighbors' homes to introduce herself. This terrified my grandmother, who was far from home and not yet comfortable in her surroundings. Mom had no such fear. Grandma always said that Mom never met a stranger she didn't befriend. That was a mom quality that never did change. My mother met my father when they were 16. They were camp counselors at a camp for children with disabilities. Dad took one look at Mom and told his friends the one in the green dress was spoken for. Mom was always known for her colorful clothing, and she always managed to stand out in a crowd. Mom and Dad had a very typical high school romance. Mom broke it off when Dad took another girl to a football game, and Mom and Dad fell out of touch briefly, but reconnected again when they were 20. It wasn't long before Mom's then boyfriend tripped up, and Dad, who'd learned his lesson, swooped in and won Mom back. It was 50 years ago. Mom and Dad attended a New Year's Eve party together as friends. Mom said she woke up on her friend's couch the next morning with Dad's arm around her, and the rest, as they say, is history. Like my grandparents, they were quickly married. They were married by Thanksgiving. In those days, such a fast courtship usually indicated an unplanned pregnancy. But Mom, who never liked to be predictable and took every opportunity to challenge stereotypes, waited 10 years to start a family. Dad never let Mom take herself too seriously. She was a planner. He was very spontaneous. She was his yin to his yang, but they shared core values, and they navigated the rapids of life together. Dad was a true feminist. He supported Mom unconditionally in everything that she did. Mom's very public career was our family business. When Mom decided to run for school trustee, Dad, who'd been working in the music industry, was called upon to design her election materials, to design the campaign slogans, to write her literature, to create her image and her style. I was 5, and my sister was not yet born, so neither of us had any recollection of life before Mom was a public figure. We grew up at rallies, at community events and festivals, and in long public consultations. It was not easy to live life as publicly as we did. There was no getting away with any mischief in the neighborhood. Mom talked to all of the neighbors, and she often knew what we were up to before we could even walk through the front door. It was the same at school. Growing up, we couldn't get away with anything, and my sister and I, for the most part, avoided trouble. Neither of us could withstand a Pam McConnell lecture. Like her speeches, they could go on. As we grew older, the expectations of our contributions to the cause also grew. I recall the day my sister got her driver's license. She was so excited for what she thought would be newfound freedom. I was 6 years older and hadn't had my driver's license for a while, and I knew that Madeline had no idea what she was in for. Mom, who never learned how to drive and could hardly see past the end of her nose, put Madeline immediately to work driving her from one event to another. This often required sitting in the car for what seemed like hours while she ran in for a quick appearance. My sister diligently paid her dues. Mom worked hard to balance her larger-than-life job and her everyday family obligations. With the help of Dad, she managed to balance as well as any professional woman could. Dad was Mom's chief political advisor, her barometer, her moral compass, and her rock. Part of Dad's role in the family business was to overcompensate in the family department. When Mom was busy with work, Dad stepped in a way that prevented us from noticing that she was busy. When Mom went to Nicaragua to deliver school supplies to war-torn communities, Dad took my sister and I to a fancy resort in the countryside. When Mom had events that lasted all weekend, he took us fishing and camping. He always ensured there were groceries in the fridge, there was dinner on the table, and he tucked us in when Mom had to work late. Mom worked hard to prioritize family too. She often brought us along to community events and shared with us the experiences that she was lucky enough to have in her work. We went to Pride, to smudging ceremonies, to Women's Day marches, to Tamil weddings, Filipino beauty pageants, and to Eid celebrations. The experiences were endless, and the learning opportunities phenomenal. It was sometimes hard to have private family time in the city. The simplest task, going to the grocery store or to a restaurant, could result in the rest of us being finished at the checkout or on the dessert course before her conversations with constituents were done. Mom had a solution, though, for all things, and always carved out time for us to leave the city. We spent many long weekends at cottages, took trips to the Caribbean, and always spent a large portion of the summer in Florida. I know most people think July in Florida is a little bit crazy, but in my 40 years, we never missed a trip. We walked on the beach, read books in the ocean, swam in the pool, and had time to just enjoy each other's company. These are my favorite memories because we had total, uninterrupted mom time. It was real family time, and Mom made up in quality what she didn't always have in quantity. I really am so fortunate. My mother was my role model, my confidant, my best friend. I spoke to her every day, often multiple times a day, and about everything under the sun. Mom and I were so connected that my husband often teased me that he had never seen an umbilical cord stretch so far. When I moved with Donovan to Oakwood Village, my mom and I cried like babies that we would be so far apart. In recent years, Mom prioritized family time more than ever. Mom loved being a grandmother and couldn't get enough time with grandchildren. Caleb was 6 when I met Donovan, and although my mom had no legal ability to adopt him, she might as well have. Caleb had his own room at her house, and they had all sorts of adventures together. It was good training for Nana Pam, and she needed it. A couple of years later, my sister and I gave her 3 more grandbabies in 15 months. Charlotte was first, and then came Jackson, followed quickly by Isabel. Nana was there from the start and as active as she could be. She loved to spoil them with new wardrobes. She sent each to surfing camp in Florida, and she had annual traditions with each of them. She and Caleb took in shows. She took the girls to the pantomimes, and Jackson to the ballet. When Miles was born, Nana found the sweet spot and would snuggle him into sleep. Last summer, when I returned to work, Nana stepped in and covered us in the daycare department until our daycare spot was available. That was while she was recovering from her first bout of pneumonia. Mom was no pushover, not even when she was in her role as Nana. If you asked any of the kids what Nana would say, they would look at you sternly, hold up their finger and say, "Nana says," "No, no, no." Mom would light up any time any of the kids were around. And as I expect you all know, she never stopped talking about them. My mother was in many ways a very ordinary person. She was a wife, a mother, a nana, and a friend. She loved to smile, to laugh, and to tell stories. She loved dinner parties with close friends, good food, and lots of wine. She was an ordinary person, but she lived an extraordinary life. Mom didn't have a fancy degree, attend Ivy League schools, or come from a family of status. What Mom had was a passion, compassion, dedication, a deep-seated belief in humanity, and a social call to duty. What I hope that Mom's life has taught us is that with these basic ingredients, anyone and everyone can make a difference. I want to just take this opportunity to say thank you all for coming. Thank you particularly to the members of the community who are here and to those who are with us in the park. I want to thank you for sharing with us our mother, for giving her so much joy in her work, for allowing her to have so many successes, for loving her so deeply, for sharing our grief so openly, for remembering her life, and for continuing her legacy. Mama, you were amazing, and we will miss you.
My name is Phil Ritchie, and I'm Pam's baby brother. And while they may not be quite so adept and experienced as crying in public, this eulogy really is the product of the efforts of my siblings, Paul, Peter, Sandra, and Lynn. As you've heard, Pam never learned to drive, primarily because of a congenital vision defect. And while those eyes may not have been made for driving, they certainly could be expressive. Some of you may have had the experience of being on the receiving end of one of Pam's looks. When she not only disagreed with what you were saying, but found it to be particularly objectionable or poorly thought out. Now, I don't mean to brag, but Pam's withering glare is just one example of a skill finally honed through her experience with me and my siblings. The first time I recall being on the receiving end of one of Pam's looks was at 6.5 years of age. Mom had just had her 6th and final child, Lynn, and I innocently asked Pam, when a baby is born, how do they tell if it's a boy or a girl? A few years ago, on a trip to Toronto for a conference, I got this same response when asking if it wouldn't be more convenient for her to fly Porter into the island airport. The last time I got this look from Pam was 1.5 years ago. Pam had just had surgery to correct her vision, and I asked her if this meant she would now learn to drive. I would like to add to colleagues and friends who have been on the receiving end of one of Pam's looks, you should be thankful she didn't also have ready access to your middle name. Because when circumstances were especially egregious, the look was inevitably accompanied by an, "Oh, Philip John." Ironically, it is sometimes in death that we discover things we didn't know about that person's life. And while I understood this to be true about friends and acquaintances, I was surprised that this was the case with Pam. Until her death, I never fully appreciated some of the similarities between Pam and my mom. Heather has mentioned some of them already, but a story that I like to tell involves Pam, who was a school board trustee at the time, getting tickets for preferential seating when Pope John Paul II visited, and inviting Mom to accompany her. When the time came for those sitting on the dais to approach the Pope for a blessing, Pam urged my mom to go. When Mom got to the Pope, she said something that left the Pope startled enough that security took a step forward. But thankfully didn't have to intervene any further. When Mom got back to her seat, Pam asked what had happened. Mom, who really was the most humble person you could meet and had a faith that could put a priest to shame, admitted that rather than asking for a blessing, she'd offered the Pope in all his resplendence, including red Italian shoes, some free advice. And that advice? Remember the poor. Pam was the very embodiment of this advice and never did forget the poor. Pam at times could be a study in contrasts, remaining so very close to those she loved, no matter how far afield she traveled, or in the case of her best friend of over 60 years, Anne Wilmot, no matter how far away you lived. Supporting and participating in Pride during a time when some would have considered it to be a political liability, and continuing to be there, supporting and participating when it became the political imperative it should be. Wearing fine Italian shoes, parenthetically, the only thing she had in common with Pope John Paul II, that in no way compromised or otherwise interfered with her absolute commitment to poverty reduction and eradication. When at times she seemed, at least to me, to have a posh English accent that belied a blue-collar pedigree she was very proud of. Finally, and ironically perhaps, the biggest contrast of all lay in Pam being less than 5 feet tall. Jim and my brother Paul once stopped to pick up Pam. She was a young elementary teacher. I believe the school went up to grade 6. They picked her up at lunchtime one day. Later were pulled over by the police because someone had reported a kidnapping. But that biggest contrast of all, Pam being less than 5 feet tall, yet always seeming larger than life. I don't know if Pam's capacity, and indeed her need to ease the suffering of others, is related to having 5 younger siblings, but I do know that each of us benefited from it. Whether dealing with hurts of the body or soul, I know that Pam could not abide any of us needlessly suffering. One Christmas, finding I'd been experiencing ongoing pain for several months from a poorly treated condition, she told my dad that they were taking me to the emergency room to get this properly sorted out. Like the rest of us, my dad knew not to argue with Pam, even if it was Christmas Day, and as a result, my suffering was greatly and quickly alleviated. I also remember as a graduate student driving to Toronto late at night, tears in my eyes, contending with a broken heart, and having been told by Pam that, of course, I would be welcome. My siblings all recalled similar times when they were hurting, and Pam offered each of us sanctuary in her home, never judging, talking if we wanted to talk, and always ensuring that we felt loved, respected, and important. As my brother Peter so nicely put it, even when I was going through some pretty low times in my life, she didn't write me off. And I think it may be this same quality that she'd left each of her friends and constituents with if they approached her with a problem or just said hi to her on the street. And I do want to take this opportunity to thank Pam's husband, Jim, because he continues to be an integral part of our family. And he has always been just as welcoming of us as Pam was, and frequently also would offer us one of his wonderful prime rib roasts, and perhaps even an occasional glass of wine. Edward Keenan of the Toronto Star acknowledged being on the receiving end of one of Pam's looks when he suggested her appointment as deputy mayor somehow constituted window dressing, something he later willingly recanted. He wrote a lovely tribute to Pam following her death, and one of the statements was, "McConnell was a serious presence at City Hall and a deliberate speaker, not often a participant in bits of monkey business and jokey banter that sometimes overtakes that body during long meetings. Again, I would suggest that rising above, or indeed ignoring monkey business, was a skill that she not only developed but perhaps perfected within the confines of our family. This isn't to suggest Pam did not have a sense of humor, just that she was somewhat judicious in deciding what she found funny and what she didn't. So it will come as no surprise that when some of the family who lived outside the GTA suggested Toronto wasn't the center of the universe, she didn't crack a smile. And that's because for Pam, Toronto was very much her universe. A universe she and her colleagues on council set out to make the best possible on a daily basis. And while her siblings were smart enough not to push the matter, I know if pressed, Pam would have admitted indeed Toronto actually was not the center of the universe. But that's because for her, the center of the universe was her family. Her ever-supportive and loving husband, Jim, their beautiful daughters, Heather and Maddie, sons-in-law, Donovan and John, and those most special people in her whole world, grandchildren Charlotte and Isabel, Caleb, Jackson, and Miles. And you grandchildren, you should know that even though Nana is no longer with us, she is looking down. And no matter what you do, or no matter how much your body or your soul are hurting, know that she would never write you off and would always be there wanting to make things better. One more thing though, if you do something really goofy, she will be looking down again then, but the look will be like this. Thank you.
Bread and Roses. How often we all sang and marched. Pam loved that song. She lived that song, always seeking and cherishing the roses amidst the work. I wonder how many people here today she marched with over the years, worked with, and celebrated with. For co-op housing and affordable housing, for parents and children in schools and drop-in centers, for safe streets and inclusive neighborhoods, for women and equity, social justice issues, the labor movement, poverty issues, for healthy cities and libraries and pools and community centers, the arts, and all of our diverse communities, for good policing, and even sometimes marching with the police. Mind you, if Pam could have had a crystal ball when all this started in the early 70s, she might have been a touch surprised to see just how extensive her involvement with the police would turn out to be in the future. And Toronto is the better for it. Back then, Jim McConnell used to refer to Pam and the wide-ranging group of friends and collaborators involved in all of these various matters as the commie broads. We assumed he meant it affectionately. So as a friend of Pam's, I want to share some things about Pam. Maybe not the most important things, some that everyone here likely already knows well, and a few others that offer a glimpse of the non-public Pam. First, friends. Some other speakers have mentioned her talent for friendship. Pam was my close friend, my sister, and co-conspirator for more than 40 years. We first met here in Toronto in the early days of the cooperative housing movement and the blossoming of urban community activism. Becoming neighbors in the Spruce Court Cooperative in Cabbagetown, we raised our families together. But about friends, you all know that making friends in her public life and just living her everyday life in the neighborhood, that was what Pam did. Issues and conflicts, politics and partisanship never stood in the way of finding friends. I know she would consider all of you here, representing so many different aspects of her life and her career, as her friends. Well, most of you anyway. I'm sure that, like me, the suddenness and shock of her death earlier in the summer hasn't fully registered as real. It's as if something is missing in our ability to understand. Something is a bit broken inside. I wish she could see all of you here today. Another thing, Pam was the real deal. Everyone just knew her as Pam. A former longtime colleague of hers and school trustee said to me the other day that Pam was totally genuine. Everyone could see that. That in her public life, she never had even one moment of hypocrisy and remained one of the most energetic and hardest working people she ever knew. Pam brought high spirits, cheerfulness, and fun to all of her causes and work. Both at work and leisure, she loved to wear colorful clothing, shoes and scarves, and she loved collecting them from her travels all over the country and the world. And always flowers at the office and at home. Pam didn't lose sight of roses. But how about the non-public Pam? Well, travel for one. She loved to travel for work, for family vacations, and with friends just for the wonder and enjoyment of it all. It's hard to think of any region of Canada she hasn't been to more than once. Her international destinations, most of them for work, ended up covering most continents. As you've heard, Florida was very important in her life, and for the last 40 years, for reasons best known only to them, they went in the heat of summer. where she could hold forth on politics and healthcare in the pool, surrounded by Southern American families who always came at the same time every year. I'm sure just for the fun of arguing with Pam. As friends, we traveled together in recent years to places like Arizona, to Boston, to Virginia. We went to Italy many times, and Spain. And that was where her last international trip was this last April. She went to Spain to represent Canada and make a presentation at an international municipal conference. She then tacked on a vacation, and she and Jim wandered up Las Ramblas in Barcelona. Then they met us in Seville for a stay in the historic medieval center and a very memorable experience. Then there were the cottage times. When our families were younger, many weekends and holidays were spent at a family cottage in all 4 seasons. Spring meant wildflowers and wild leek walks, and Easter. Our kids all thought it was normal to hunt for Easter eggs and candy in the melting snow outside. Ever the teacher, Pam made sure that each child always got a new book in their Easter basket. Winters were cross-country ski times, somehow also involving the dogs who sank into the snow, followed by cranking up the wood-burning fireplace as high as Pam and Jim could manage. Thanksgiving dinners were served after taking Connor and Lucy, the dogs, and the children, of course, Heather Ann, Sean, and Madeline, for long walks in the crisp air. But best of all for Pam were the mornings, staying in her flannel nightgown all morning long, drinking coffee and reading with her old reading glasses and not having to put in her contacts that she wore for work. And she would do that right up until lunchtime. The internal struggle she had and lost every time was whether to start in on her licorice before or after lunch, and while she was still drinking her morning coffee. I think for Pam, licorice was another one of life's roses to be cherished. And for Pam and I, there was precious time to catch up on the news, the struggles and triumphs of both of our very extended families and friends, highlights of work accomplishments and setbacks. These things take a lot of time to talk about and a lot of licorice. Did I mention that cooking was in the rose category for Pam rather than a chore? Whether at the cottage or home, Pam loved to cook. A cottage specialty of hers involved bringing up all the leftover vegetable scraps from home to make stock, simmering on the back of the stove all day, and then to be made into whatever the soup of the day was. Jim was not overly impressed with leftover soup, thus the cottage and a wider customer base. At home, Pam always cooked family dinners for the tribe, as she called us all, with Jim as a co-host. Potluck contributions and flowers on the table were always a factor. There's those roses again. As our children grew up and had children of their own, and the family expanded in so many ways, and after Pam and Jim moved out of the co-op a few blocks away into a new apartment in Regent Park, space challenges collided with the growing families. But somehow there was always room at the table. Did I mention generosity yet? See, the thing about families and food is this: there's always room for more. Pam didn't ever worry about technical definitions of family, knowing they take many shapes and sizes, and they should always be ready to expand. After the cottage years, most Sunday mornings when my phone would ring, I knew it would be Pam. After all, not too many community events were scheduled then. We would have long chats, catching up on family and friends, and key events in our work weeks. For Pam, people were always at the heart of what she would advocate for, and they were the why of things. She respected all the people she encountered and worked with in order to advance all of these important causes and projects, no matter what side of the issue they were on. There was a little thing she used to say which sticks with me now. Call it one of those roses things. There would come a pause, and she would comment, "You know, she's really a kind person," or, "I watched him do this really kind thing in that meeting." And that meant it was noted forever, and it shaped all of her future dealings with that person. It was her highest commendation, the thing that stuck the longest, and I think it is revealing. For Pam was one of the kindest persons I have ever known.
We're here today to remember and to celebrate someone who is very special to each and every one of us here. Each of us knew Pam and loved her in our very own way. I'm very humbled to be able to speak about Pam because I think every single one of you in this church and in the park could speak about Pam and how she made your life better and our city better. We'll have that chance later when we gather in the park, in our beautiful park, to tell these stories to one another. For Pam's family, she was a loving wife, mother, mother-in-law, sister, and aunt. And I want to express deepest condolences from all of us here to you, Jim, Heather Ann, Madeline, Charlotte, Jackson, Izzy, Miles, and Caleb, and the entire McConnell Ritchie clan, which we've gotten to know a little bit better today, I would say. She was always so proud of all of you. Thank you for sharing her with us. You have lost a bright and loving light in your family. Elected and re-elected to serve her community for 35 years, she served it so well. And like the Starship Enterprise, went places where no trustee or counselor had ever gone before. She was first elected in 1982 as school trustee for the Toronto Board of Education, and she was elected chair in 1992. She was first elected councillor in 1994. When Mayor Barbara Hall was elected, she took Barbara Hall's seat, who had been the councillor. And she was re-elected as a new councillor for the megacity in 1997, and re-elected handily every time since by so many of you here today. Those of us, our colleagues who worked with Pam, knew how fiercely proud she was of all of her neighborhoods in her ward. Regent Park, St. Lawrence, Cabbage Town, St. James Town, Cork Town, the West Don Lands, the Distillery District, and of course the island. Did I miss anything? Because Pam talked about you all the time. She moved into her condo in Regent Park at the very beginning of revitalization. Not everybody believed it could be successfully revitalized at that time, at the very beginning. So Pam walked the walk, and she never looked back. First and foremost, Pam was a loyal and loving person. She was loyal to her family, loyal to her constituents, loyal to her friends, and loyal to her working-class roots. You couldn't help notice that when Pam waved her hands to make a point, she had the most beautiful fingernails. For over 20 years, she went to Star Nails on Parliament and had her nails painted the exact same shade of purple. Kinky in Helsinki. There was only one exception in all of those years: the day she had her nails painted bright orange to remember the passing of Jack Layton. She was also loyal to her party, the New Democratic Party. As a school trustee, when Pam met a child struggling to get special education services or a child coming to school hungry, she set out to fix that situation first for that child, and then to fix the system for all children. Pam's contribution to equity in Toronto was substantial. She did groundbreaking work, both as a school trustee and as a counselor. And by equity, I mean social equity, income equity, women's equity, racial equity, and LGBTQ equity. As a trustee over 25 years ago, Pam led in the hiring and promotion of equity-seeking groups within the Toronto Board of Education. It was groundbreaking. Along with Pauline Shirt, who you met earlier today, and others, Pam helped found the Wandering Spirit Survival School, later called First Nations, at Dundas School in her school board ward. She set the groundwork for LGBTQ programs within the Board of Education. She made nutrition programs happen for children in inner-city schools, the same nutrition programs that are still going strong today. She established women's studies and labor studies programs at the school board. and Pam continued that work as a city councilor. As a feminist, she remained a steadfast champion for advancing women into leadership positions and acknowledging the very important role they play in politics. She took a leading role at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities on women's participation in local government, and even when ill, traveled to the Ukraine to speak with women there about participation in political life. And I'll acknowledge Barry Vervenovic, the mayor of Kitchener, who worked very closely with Pam on all of these things and supported her in that role at FCM. So it's no coincidence, actually, that Jane Dick was named the first woman deputy chief ever in the city of Toronto when Pam held a seat on the Police Services Board, or that she insisted on and got ice time for women's shinny hockey in the city when they simply weren't allowed on the rink. That was decades ago, by the way. For Pam, we were all her sisters, as she liked to call us. We have all witnessed her strong commitment to affordable housing and tenants' rights. Pam's advocacy for tenants actually started prior to her being elected, when she and 2 other co-op activists set up the city's first tenant hotline. They were sued by the Law Society for practicing law without a license. And it was Pam's calm, steel, strong voice that saw them successfully through this challenge and maintaining that hotline. Pam believed in housing as a basic human right, and she used every lever of power within her grasp to ensure that affordable housing was being built in a variety of forms in our city. She championed the rebuilding of 2,000 homes at Regent Park and adding 500 more mixed-income housing. She even managed to build the Unite Here co-op at 60 Richmond Street as part of the revitalized Regent Park. She believed in co-op housing. She believed it built the skills of those tenants living there, particularly women. Pam's negotiation skills around development were renowned, and I know you've all read about the $2 million from Donald Trump. She worked in partnership with city staff to get the best outcomes for her neighborhoods and for our city. She had great respect for and was greatly respected by all city staff, as evidenced by the many fond remembrances of their common achievements that were sent to her family after her passing. Pam, however, did have a hearing problem. When repeated staff reports said that the Wellesley Community Center could not be built as envisioned, she never could hear the word no. She just heard, "Not right now." So you're all invited after the service, after our time in the park, to take a swim, have a workout, or take out a book at the beautiful Wellesley Community Center. Pam believed in the dignity of work, and it was a strong supporter of the labor movement in Toronto. For her, issues like contracting out good jobs and selling affordable housing out from under those who needed it were just plain bad ideas. And in her long political career, Pam served under quite a few mayors, and there are quite a few mayors and former mayors, well, only one mayor here, the others are all former mayors, here today. Former mayors Crombie and Eggleton, former Mayor Hall, former Mayor Miller, and of course, our current Mayor John Tory. She made a tremendous contribution to all of those administrations. Quite simply, Pam was a mountain mover. She made things happen. She was dogged and determined. She developed very sophisticated skills and assumed a senior position of leadership honed through years of experience. She asked us to be kind to one another and to disagree respectfully when we disagreed. and she was the navigator to get all sides to the island. Not that island I mentioned earlier with the that was mentioned earlier with the airport, but the political island, that sweet spot where everybody wins. It was those qualities and characteristics that were recognized by Mayor Tory when he made her his deputy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for recognizing those incredible qualities in Pam and for allowing her to provide solid leadership, not only for City Council, but for the citizens of this city. And it was also those characteristics that have brought others here today, the Premier, the leader of the New Democratic Party, MPs, MPPs, her council colleagues and former council colleagues. I know she would be, and school trustees from the Toronto District School Board. I know she would be so pleased and proud to have you all here. When Pam was first elected to City Council in 1994, it was at the same time as her friend Dan Leckie, whom she had served on the school board with. When Dan tragically died of a brain aneurysm in 1998, Jack Layton found Dan's list of things he planned to accomplish on his Palm Pilot. Now, that was the forerunner of our iPhone and BlackBerry. Jack, along with Pam and others, took on Dan's list, the biggest one being the takedown of the Gardiner Expressway, which has now been accomplished from Coxwell to Booth and approved from Booth to Cherry. Not only did Pam move mountains, she bulldozed expressways. It will come as no surprise to you, therefore, to know that Pam also has a list for us. Finishing the revitalization of Regent Park by completing phases 4 and 5, including adding a new library, the revitalization of St. Jamestown, the revitalization of the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal, completing the North Market revitalization. Are you noticing a theme here on this list? In July, Council passed Tenants First, which among other things created a new agency for seniors living in TCHC and sets the stage for more reforms there. From her hospital bed, on the evening of July 5th, Pam was texting and asking, "Did it pass? Did it pass?" Yes, Pam, it did. Building more affordable housing, including more co-ops, is on Pam's list. Getting the North Market built, eradicating poverty in the city, electing strong women to City Council office, and hiring them into leadership positions in the City of Toronto, and embracing the humanity of all Torontonians, in particular those who are less fortunate and those often without a voice. It's up to us now to accomplish Pam's list. And by all of us, I mean all of us, because as Pam knew well, city building is a big tent affair. So here we are today in this beautiful cathedral to say goodbye to our Pam. We happen to be adjacent to St. James Park, where the Occupy movement set up their encampment. Pam was very active at the time, trying to broker a peaceful solution to find the island so that the occupiers would not be physically thrown off the park, as was being increasingly demanded by the mayor of the day and others. Despite her impeccable nails, her pearls, her Ferragamo shoes, her silk scarves, she saw the occupiers with a different lens. So it was no surprise when one of the occupiers leaned over to her and whispered, "Pam, we know you're an occupier at heart." Pam, in your fight for equality and social justice, your passionate championing of women, your steadfast belief in the dignity of work, and your uncompromising advocacy for a better life for all people in this city, you occupied our hearts. We will be thinking and acting on things still to be done, and we'll work to accomplish them. will think of you often with fondness, with respect, with love, and more than a little bit of awe. In Latin America, there is a beautiful tradition, which some of you may already know. When a beloved personality passes on, they are never really considered gone. Their important work surrounds those left behind. At large gatherings such as these, their names are called out loud, followed by a loud presente. It means that even though the person is gone, they are still here with us. So when I say Pam McConnell in a minute, you say presente. I know we're Canadians and not used to doing such things, but I want you to remember that Pam would love this, so we will do it for her. Please say it to remember her and bring her spirit with us today. Please say it to remember her together with one voice as one community. Pam McConnell, presente. Pam McConnell, presente. Pam McConnell.
I begin by saying thank you to Pam's family for the sacrifices that they have made down through the years, enabling Pam to do her work. No one involved in public service does it alone, and those who stand with them, who love them, are also involved in that work and in supporting Pam's success down through the years, so thank you. And thank you for the care that you gave Pam during her illness. Before I talk about Pam, I'd like to address what for many of us was the suddenness of her passing. Whenever anyone dies so suddenly, there are many questions, many things left undone, appreciations left unsaid, love left unexpressed. Well, there are many beliefs about what happens to a person when they die, and frankly, there is so much that we do not know. Some traditions believe that the person's spirit lingers for a while, so I would encourage you to take some quiet time to speak to Pam, to write down your thoughts to Pam. A sudden death reminds all of us of the fragility of life and the importance of being as current as we can to express appreciation, to express love, and to express our apologies. Take some time in the next few days to reach out to others and to make it a practice to be as current as you can in expressing appreciation, love, and apology. Today you've heard of many of Pam's achievements, what she was passionate about, what she worked hard to bring about. I would like to acknowledge the particular loss being felt by Pam's colleagues on City Council and by the many community leaders she worked with. You've lost a dear friend, a trusted partner, but you have not lost the work that you have accomplished together, nor have you lost the vision for a better world. Treasure the work done. Hold fast to the vision of what can be, of what needs to be. Rest a while, then get back to work, because the world needs you to fill the gap left by Pam's passing. I would like to address two qualities that I saw in Pam. In the Quran, there's a verse that states, "God blesses those who persevere." I believe that one of the most powerful things in this world is an optimistic activist who keeps at it and at it and at it. And certainly, Pam persevered. Often she would win you over by convincing explanation, but if she didn't, you knew that she would be coming back again and again and again. So you might as well join in the cause at the beginning rather than waste your time. The many world religions share one common value of compassion. In the Hebrew and Christian scriptures, they talk about loving our neighbors and about the importance of caring for those, particularly the poor, and those facing challenges due to illness and hatred. Pam combined her strength with compassion and kindness. She had the ability to work with anyone. She knew that how we are with each other was just as important as the work we do. She treated everyone equally. Whether she was heading for a meeting with the mayor or with community leaders, she would be late for all of them. She treated everyone equally. We're so thankful for what we call Pam's legacy. However, I would like to challenge us a little bit regarding this. Over the last few years, I've been reading a lot about the concept of retirement and legacy, and I was struck by a comment I came across. It's been said that a person's legacy is not what they leave behind when they retire or die. No, their real legacy is what remains 5 years after they retire or die. So Pam's legacy will really be determined by what we do with what she did, how we carry on her work, how we build upon what she began, how we persevere, how we work to transform our world, how we are with each other, what we do about poverty, injustice, and inequity. So as we rightly recognize and celebrate her accomplishments, let us also remember that her legacy is now in our hands. The real power is in movement building, in multiplying what we can do together. When someone dies, there are often questions, thoughts about things like heaven and hell. Unfortunately, some people are so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good. But things about heaven and hell, we know very little. Instead, I would encourage you to be more concerned about creating heaven here on earth for everyone. To be more concerned about ensuring that everyone experiences less of a hell here on earth. I believe that life is an amazing, amazing gift that we're given. Each morning we wake up with new opportunities to love and to be loved, new opportunities to go deeper spiritually, new opportunities to make the world a better place for those who will come after us. We enter this amazing gift through birth, and we exit this gift through death to continue on our spiritual journey, trusting that one day we will be reunited with those who have gone on before us. In closing, I think it's appropriate for me to give Pam the last word. When she was in hospital on Friday, June the 23rd, in her bed hooked up to machines, she took time to write an email to me because she wasn't going to be able to attend the Pride service that year. Imagine. And she knew it was going to be my last Pride service presiding as senior pastor. And she wrote, "Well, I'm guessing you're a bit busy. Maybe you haven't noticed my face, that I've been scarce the last few weeks. Here's what's been happening. I've had a lung infection for 18 months, and a year ago I had full-blown pneumonia, prednisone since the fall, and occurring flare-ups. 3 weeks ago it got much worse, and I was having trouble breathing. And Tuesday of this week, I was admitted to Toronto General. So I won't be seeing you over the weekend. Don't worry, I'm in great hands. Although the world rebound specialists look like they're all 14 years old. So when you read out the names of your attending supporters, I won't be standing there, but I will be there in spirit, enjoying your last sermon, your last ovation, and your lasting love. Enjoy your special day and have a wonderful weekend. Look around at what you built with your love, your tenacity, and your strategic brilliance. But it is your love and ours that we will see and feel on Sunday. Happy Pride, my love, Pam. So Pam, I say to you, thank you for our ability to know that we were in such great hands for so long. Thank you for your spirit, for your speeches, and for your lasting love. And Pam, look around. Look around at the communities and at this city that you helped to build with your love, with your tenacity, and with your strategic brilliance. It is your love, Pam, and it is our love for each other that we will see as we walk about this city and as we continue to create the city that we want. Blessings, my love, Pam. Well done, Pam. Well done.
Go forth upon your journey from this world, dear child of God, into the hands of the Creator who made you, to find life in Christ who redeemed you, to rejoice in the Spirit who renews you. May the heavenly host sustain you, and the company of the redeemed enfold you, and may peace be yours this day, and the heavenly city your home. Rest eternal grant to her, O Lord.
For all of us involved in this service, it was an honor to be asked and an honor to participate in the celebration of Pam's life, so we thank the family for inviting us. We thank all those who've worked behind the scenes making today's service possible. Pam's staff at the city, especially Sean, the City Council and its staff, and the wonderful folks here at St. James. We will now close with a benediction and then a statement from Pam's family. This is a benediction Pam would have heard many times at Metropolitan Community Church of Toronto and at many Pride services. As you go from this place, go knowing that God's blessings go before you, that God's face will shine upon you and be gracious unto you, and God will grant you peace. In your going out and in your coming in your lying down and in your rising up, in your labor, in your leisure, in your laughter, and in your tears, until that day in which there is no dawning and no sunset, no death, and no disease. Go now rejoicing that God loves you. Go now and treasure the memories. Go now and transform the world. Amen. At the time before the family recesses, the family would like to acknowledge and thank each of you for being here, as well as those in the park and those unable to attend. We'd ask the family to please rise now and to face the congregation. They have been overwhelmed with the outpouring of sympathy and support. The family and City Council invite you to join them and all of us in the park following the recessional, where we will continue to share stories, enjoy some refreshments, and commit ourselves to continuing on Pam's work together in community. Let us now join together and sing the recessional song.
I'd like to thank the guy who wrote the song that shabab, shabab. Who put the dip in the dip, 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 dip? Who was that?